Merci Daniel. Bonsoir tout le monde. I'm super excited to be here with you tonight. Unfortunately, I'm speaking English tonight. Trust me, it would be too slow for me to speak to you in French, but at the questions and answer period, it'll be in French. We look forward to that. Tonight, we have an incredible program, folks. I was asked to come and be the moderator for a session with the team of Blur. And the first thing I want to ask is if I could see a show of hands if you've actually experienced the artwork. So if you've seen the piece, okay. So I would say about half of the people here have seen the piece. Another show of hands, who has never tried a VR helmet or an augmented reality experience? Who is like completely new at what we're about to talk for about 1 hour? Nobody, okay. So we don't have to do Augmented Reality 101. That's really useful. Thank you so much. Tonight, we are going to be joined right here by 4 people. So I'm going to call them out. Phoebe, please join us. Phoebe Greenberg, as you know. Well, who doesn't know Phoebe Greenberg? All right. Okay. So this is Phoebe joining us on stage, please. Thank you. We have Thomas Azug, the Senior Software Technical Director for the project. Thomas. And then we have Edouard Langto-Benoit, Creative Technologist at FI. And finally, we have Myriam Achard, the great Chief New Media Partnerships person in FI. So yeah.
Unfortunately, the co-creator with me, Craig Quintero, was unable to join us this evening, so I'll be speaking on behalf of both of us. Thank you.
Is Craig Quintero in Taiwan? Okay. Well, we'll go over that in a second. Folks, what we'll do is the first thing is we'll show the trailer for the project just to refresh our memories if you've seen it, and then we'll get right into discussing the different aspects of the project, from creative to technical to design to presentation. So if please, Eddie, if you can show us the trailer, please.
It's easy to get lost sometimes, to lose yourself. The movement from here to there, and now, and then, stillness.
Thank you. As soon as I got invited, I was excited to come because I have been seeing all sorts of different augmented reality and VR works for a long time. I'm a media artist, and I used to try the helmets back in 1994, and be worried about, what was coming. And it is now that I think we're starting to have really robust experiences in this medium, and I think that you guys are really quite sensational at being able to pull it off in a way that is not just technically meritorious, but also artistically and critically, important. So I just want to say that. And can we just have one round of applause for these guys, because they worked so incredibly hard. And one of the problems with having only 10 people come in at a time is that you guys did not get like the big crowd just clapping for you at the end of the session. You see what I mean? Because it's such an intimate and personal experience that this kind of feedback that we have the opportunity to share now makes it special. So I'll start with asking Phoebe just for, for a summary of what Craig Quintero and you have put together aesthetically, in terms of script, in terms of what you wanted to do with this project. So maybe describe it for people who have not seen it yet.
It all began because I often go to Venice for Venice VR, the immersive part of the film festival. And I had seen Craig's work, All That Remains, I can't remember what year it was, about 20, yeah, thank you. And I was really impressed with how he translated his world to the VR language. He comes from the theater. I really recognized the intimacy and the play, and it was such a powerful piece that I wanted to meet him, and we found out that we really had common ground. You know, I come from a background of theater. I had studied and graduated from Jacques Lecoq in Paris, and so storytelling is something that I became more and more intrigued in the last decade since we've been working with the VR headset. And we really wanted to challenge some of the opportunity that we had seen and what we thought we could bring by integrating live actors and really thinking of it almost as a mixed reality theater piece. So because of this common ground, we started to discuss, and I had read an article on the de-extinction of the woolly mammoth. And for some reason, that premise stuck in my head. And I started thinking about, what's happening in bioengineering and what are the consequences and what questions arise from resurrection biology or cloning or any of these issues that really begin to question our notion of our own mortality, of death. So that was where we started the discussion. And it was important for me to kind of think of something that really spoke to the storytelling opportunity, but also had relevance in our contemporary landscape.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about the actual setup for the piece. So this is a mixed reality experience with live actors, with augmented reality, with virtual reality. There's about 4 or 5 or 6 levels of depth that you experience this in. So many realities coexisting, and yet, the team managed to make it look magical and seamless. You jump from one reality to the next very seamlessly. But what happens in this reality? What would people who haven't seen the work expect? Is this, would you consider it a linear narrative? Would you consider it something that is a dystopian project or just like a Gesamtkunstwerk? Is this like just, an ambient? Tell us a little bit about how theatrical or how much of a dramaturgy there is to Blur, and what is that dramaturgy?
Well, I think the premise was really to build a coherent narrative, despite the surrealistic. Both of us shared our common ground in references from contemporary art, references from theater, references from film, documentary, and we started to think of the lines of exploration about the relevance of the actual topic and what would happen if the world was overpopulated in the context of nobody ever dying. And so world building around some of these premises became an opportunity to think through imagery and poetic interpretation. So there's not heavy dialogue. The coherency is through you follow the protagonist. You meet her first as a live actress, and then she glides into the VR avatar, and then you see her again through pass-through. And we really wanted to build a narrative line that also had emotional impact. So telling her story, the loss of the child, for example, we were able to engage an illustrator who quickly was able to narrate that emotional storyline in a rather economical and poetic way. So as you go from world to world and really building, the 360 environment, The coherency was one in the emotional attachment to the event and also to the transitions from one format to the next.
So let's stop for a second and talk about this illustration, because this is an artist from, no, not the one that I'm showing, but these are just slides of different scenes of the development and presentation of Blur. But I want to ask you about the illustration that you just mentioned. That's a Montreal artist, right?
Yes.
Okay. And she's incredible because she's doing this incredibly subtle and grounded and material presentation that in a way is the simplest of all the forms that are presented, and it's really nice to juxtapose it with it. So let me ask you, I mean, you work with illustrators, you work with choreographers, with musicians. This is really like an archipelago of different disciplines coming together. Can you tell us about those disciplines that come together?
Well, it was actually really thrilling to work with people with traditional practices and find room for them in this digital world, in this translation. For example, the Dancing Lamb was done in mocap with a dancer who came actually from Sweden, and it was Edward Locke, the choreographer, who translated that dance or choreographed the dance. And it was such a joy to see his work in another form. And I feel the same way about the composers. There was Eugene, who was one of our composers, predominant composer, and also Giovanni Ortega was also one of the composers. So people who have traditional practices found a translation into this VR world.
So we are going to talk about technical stuff, and then we're going to come back to you. But I want to just ask you, first of all, when you're co-creating, so not just with Craig Quintero, but also with all of the different actors, composers, and so on, do you see yourself as a director of an orchestra? Are you a facilitator? Are you a, dictator? What kind of creator are you?
I don't know if I should answer that question. No, I think there's a lot of happy accidents. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is definitely the unknown and the participation. It's like a theater company. You have your lighting designer, you have your set designer, et cetera. But now around the room is developers and computers, and things like improvisation are a little bit difficult to define. Right. So I think we work on a premise and challenge it and see if we can realize it. And I think that one of the important thing is that everybody was enthusiastic about pushing those boundaries. Right. Whether we worked with Behavior Studios for some of the animation and the synthetic world building, and we wanted to see how far we could go. And I think even to think about the embodiment of the physical body in the digital space by using mocap, there's a difference of what you feel, the audience feels. And I think to defend that point of view and really, think about the navigation systems. I mean, for those who have experienced it, I'm not sure if you realized that you were not in a platform bigger than this room, yet, you covered distance, so the whole navigation system is really complex as the story unfolds. And I raise my hat to my team for managing, not only to survey the public to ensure that they had the best experience possible, but also to provide the correct navigation to make it very intuitive, mm-hmm. and including the haptics as well to really integrate the intimacy of the theater, yet the touch and the feel of something that might be live, but destabilizing because we're in a technical environment.
Before I leave you, there's a quote from Marcel Duchamp that said that the artist is a creator of context. And I think that that's what you are. I think that you create a context. And by that I mean Blur itself is an environment that is to be pursued and observed and experienced, but then also the context for other artists to speak. And there's a certain generosity that comes from that kind of approach that I think makes you a really powerful artist, to be honest. I've known you for many years. Let's not talk about how many. But the thing is, I find that more and more your voice is putting together unbelievable teams and helping this as a catalyst, mature. So I remember when I saw that L'Infini, there was Marie Brassard had made some key contributions. That's so important, right? Because Marie is like a genius in theater, and these small contributions that come not from technology, but from the from sensitivity, from sensibility, you've always incorporated. So I mean, that's not a question. I'm just letting you know you're great, and it's amazing that you're doing this context-based work. We'll come back to you, but we're going to move, please, over to Thomas. So Thomas, we had an opportunity to meet. Let me advance some of these slides from time to time, and can you walk us through? So I reckon there's about 7 realities being represented. This is truly like a metaverse kind of experience, right? We're dealing with live actors, we're dealing with recorded actors, immersive recorded actors, we're dealing with haptics, with documentation, with line drawing. Walk us through not just how many of these levels of reality there are, but how do they jump from one to the other without feeling schizophrenic, or slightly schizophrenic. Slightly schizophrenic.
I think during the creation of Blur, the collaborative process was an extremely important key element that redefined both how we articulated the production, but also how creatively we really came up with the whole concept of Blur. You know, you were describing how many collaborators have worked with us, but really, even during the creation process, we had many opportunities where we would sit together with a team and, just think of these ideas that we had or the technologies that were available to us, and what would be great to do with it and how they could contribute to the project. So we had many opportunities during the production to have these workshops where we would kind of pause the creative process and just start playing with the tools that we had access to, and then we would regroup under Phoebe and Craig's creative leadership, and just figure out where we want to go from there.
So is it the situation when you're making a film, you have a lot of métrage, you have a lot of extra film. Is there a bunch of ideas that you guys threw away and only picked the ones that you thought were most successful? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Were you disappointed with some of these directorial decisions? Or is there one scene that one day we will have, your version of it, and it'll bring in a module that got cut in the editing floor? No.
No. We definitely had to make some decisions along the way that impacted the final experience. Ultimately, I think most of these decisions were the right ones, and that they led to what is probably the best version of Blur that we were all expecting. But there's definitely some points along the way where we could have ended up with something completely different. For example, there was a possibility at one point that the physical scenography would be a lot more present throughout the experience, and spectators would really have to navigate in VR through a physical maze. It came with a lot of technical and production constraints that ended up meaning that ultimately it also restrained what creatively we could do and how much further we could push the piece forward. So yeah, these kind of compromises had to be done quite a lot during the process.
And I mean, we were just talking about how Phoebe has a panoramic understanding of art, of the different disciplines. In a way, you also have a generalist approach, right? Because you're, say, the software architect for this thing, but you're not married to a tool, right? Like, you're not a user. You're a developer. You're connecting different types of machines that have not been connected. They're speaking to each other. So would you agree that you are, you are not committed to a tool, but rather just at seeing what actually works. You're a generalist, is that accurate?
I think in our shared vision of how we want to create these experiences, we definitely want technology to serve the creativity and the purpose of the experience, and not just create things to showcase technology. It's really the other way around for us. And we're really not married to any one tool. And especially, as you were describing these different layers of Blur, I think the concept of patchwork is very present at different levels of Blur, both creatively in the different visual universes that you traverse during the experience, but also during the collaboration with our different partners and all the different artists and all their practices that were incorporated into the experience, but also on a technical level regarding how all these different technologies communicate with one another. And as you pointed out, that was indeed my main task during this project, was really to figure out how to assemble this puzzle of technologies in order to make the experience work.
But now let me ask you, not as a technologist, but as somebody who was involved in the creation of the project. You've experienced it a billion times. Now I want to ask you as a person, whether you not think that Blur is not using technology as a tool, but as an inescapable medium that is in fact the subject of the piece itself. So I would like to ask you conceptually whether you think that a slightly dystopian or very dystopian approach is something that you as a technologist sees. And the reason I'm asking is because oftentimes people like myself, I'm so excited about different connections of technology that often we are read as techno-optimists, and I hate those guys. So the question is, Thomas, are you a techno-optimist, or do you think that we're about to, bring down the entire civilization? No, so put it a different way. Are you proud?
Don't worry,
Okay,
don't
okay,
worry.
sorry, okay.
I'm good. I think, as far as the different media have evolved throughout the years, I feel like VR is a very interesting new turn for this kind of media, because it's so immersive. It really comes to override your sense of sight completely, and it immerses you in this world that the creators of the VR experience have designed for you. We absolutely control what you see and what you hear. And I feel like this is both an incredible tool that gives us the power to envision worlds to a level that is really so close to our five senses and really make you believe in those worlds that we create. But it also has that second meaning of, we control what you see in a way.
Yeah.
And, I think all tools are, as good as the people employing them, as we tend to say. But I feel like in the world of artistic experiences like this, there's a purpose, there's a way to employ these tools so that we also enable everyone to understand the reach, the impact of this technology, and also that control can also be part of the experience in a way. Throughout the experience of Blur, your sense of reality is really being toyed with. That I've been behind the scenes watching a lot of people do the experience, and we get people at sometimes questioning, is this real? They'll get to a specific scene, which I will not spoil, where they are not actually sure if what they're seeing is real or not. And I think showcasing this in this kind of experience also showcases the power of this tool. And then whether that power is a good or bad thing, I think is also up to interpretation. But I think it's important for these kind of experiences to make people aware of this potential.
Thank you so much. We'll come back to whether you're a techno-optimist or not. But I'll pass the mic to Edouard Langto-Benoit, so creative technologist, which is, again, another really panoramic term, right? So if I'm understanding right, Thomas is doing a lot of their software architecture, but you have a more holistic sensor, computer, different types of approaches that also straddle on the hardware. Tell us a little bit about your work, Edouard.
The way I see it, I'm more of an artist enabler. So
Okay.
we work with all of these different artists, and Craig and Phoebe are the main ones, but also there's all of these collaborators, and we're sort of trying to make sure that their work is represented and help them translate their ideas and translate their views and their vision into something that works technologically, that works within the constraints of a piece like Blur that's 30 minutes with 10 people at the same time, so lots of constraints just physically and in terms of feasibility. In terms of headset, we're working with standalone headsets, and these are very low power, they're working on battery, and so you have to make sure that show them the limits of what works, what doesn't work, and so that's kind of my work is helping them and doing tests with them and showing them, how can we push your idea further?
I don't know if there's any members of my team here, but we have to listen to Edouard when he says artist enabler. That is something we need at my team, please. Thank you. It's a really great title, right? Because you're a translator, you're a diplomat, you're bridging different types of gaps. Do you ever have artists malfunction?
No, I don't think so. Well, whenever there's a vision, there's always things that we cannot do. But that's just part of the discussion. We start with ideas, and the way we do it is we work really iteratively. So we make sure that there's no bad surprises. We start with really small tests. When we started with Blur, we put on a headset. We were talking about that earlier, and we just made this half-an-hour test with the headset of trying mixed reality, trying portals, going from reality to VR and back and forth, and trying with actual physical elements that you can touch in VR or that you can see and pass through. And so we're doing all these tests so that the artist knows what works and what doesn't. And then we let them write. And so there's no bad surprises there because we warn them beforehand.
And you created the playground in a way, and they set the variables.
Absolutely.
You want to say something?
No, I was just saying that it was very helpful in the workshop situation, and often we would, like one of the things was we had a doorway, and there was a virtual world, but we had somebody in mocap, and that person became the avatar in the doorway, but could still stick their head out, and you could see the physical mocap, and just the suspension of belief in some of these happy accidents sometimes, or informing us on what is possible. This is new territory.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gets integrated into some of the narrative line, because we went, wow, what can we write around that moment that has never been done? So I think that working with such a great team in more of a workshop situation, like to set the parameters on the subject matter, or sort of the interpretation of some of the poetry or the visual cues, or certainly on style. Craig and I had a lot of affinity, but we also had a lot of wonder, because we had the opportunity to workshop and learn.
And the workshops were here in Montreal or in Taiwan?
Well, that was the other wonderful thing about this production, is it was between Taiwan and Montreal, and also we did a workshop at the Onassis Foundation in Greece. And I think just the language of the piece, the universality of the theme, and just the expertise. It's a niche group of people that are aspiring to do this type of storytelling, and really having the opportunity to share knowledge, and have the time to experiment.
How big were those workshops? I mean, let me go back to him, okay? So how many people were working with you directly and then expanded to the full credit list?
During the workshop, or like?
Well,
I think-
first workshop, because Phoebe is saying that is such an important source of all of the experiments that you guys ended up using. So how big were those workshops?
We were about 10 people, and I think what's really interesting about these workshops is that, so at its core, Blur, it's sort of this merge between Phi and a theater company in Taiwan called Riverbed Theater, and and so this workshop format of working was kind of an adaptation of working with theater people.
Nice.
That's what they do. We come together in a theater and we try things. And so it was really this kind of, this merge of theater and technology. And we were about 10 people, and we had Yujun composing sound. We had Carl, who was a scenographer. And we're doing technology workshop, and there was a scenographer, but he was doing maquettes, and he was doing miniatures and scenography. And then we filmed this scenography. We did photogrammetry to create 3D assets out of it, and so it created all of these strange mix of working with people that we didn't expect would come out of.
And it looked like a lot of fun. I mean,
Really.
what's happening in this scene, guys? This is...
I don't know.
we don't want to talk about it? Okay.
Edward pushed me.
Okay.
Get a glimpse to see Phoebe's artistic practice.
There you go, yeah. Okay, so, but let's continue with Edouard, because I have a couple more questions about that. So, now you're enabling the artists. The artists are coming together to make decisions about the final product or the final direction. And when you're working with these technologies, you were saying it's very theatrical, right? There's a sense of the live act. Did you bring when did the live act come into it? It was already at the workshops, or did you? Okay. Oh, I see.
We started from there.
Oh, I see.
I mean, when we got one of the first technological questions, at least technologically, we thought when starting Blur was, what can we do with mixed reality? What can we do with this new headset that arrives that can do see world and see virtual at the same time, or superimpose, or go from one world to another? And we're working with a theater company, so this question just asks itself. What can we do with actors? And so at first, that's the first thing we did.
You want to say something? Go ahead.
No,
No, you're good. I like very much, there's a great book by Brenda Laurel, Computers as Theater, right? This is a pioneer of VR, who is already talking about this. And I think it's really almost ironic that a lot of people that work in the immersive space are discovering theater. And I'm like, folks, this is like 4,000 years old, whatever, more. And it's interesting to me that for you all, that's very natural. But I want to emphasize that that's not the case. A lot of the people who are working in this field are completely, sort of following the cyberpunk idea of your body is just meat that's left behind. So I want to commend you for bringing in that theatricality into it. It's very, very exciting. I had one last question for you, which is, you've been working at Phi for 6 years or something like that, right? Okay. And a lot of what you have learned in previous productions, you've put into play here. Is that true? So were you working, tell us a little bit about how previous productions that you guys have done have helped this project come to?
I think it's more of a question for Thomas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually been involved in another immersive theater experience before, more than one actually.
But not Phi's?
Not a fight. No.
Oh,
That's it. But it was presented.
We showed it here.
It was
That's how
presented
we
at
met
Phi.
I see.
Thomas.
Okay.
We just didn't let him go.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was
Smart.
in 2019. It was called The Horrifically Real Virtuality. It was presented here on the second floor. And I think that was around the time where immersive theater and virtual reality were starting to, kind of discover each other, and there was this new potential with the technologies that became available at the time to explore this new field. And even though that field was vaguely popular around that time, it kind of stayed dormant for a few years, and we're bringing it back. Whoa.
But
So-
on top of that, also, I was thinking of the infinite, because we're developing this expertise internally of a gigantic technological team, mediators, just people who know how VR works. And when I was pointing to Thomas knows how people will move, how we can make sure that they never collision inside the piece. We have simulators. We have a whole bunch of tools that we use to make sure that everything is smooth and you don't notice, but you're actually in this sort of dance of people, 10 people turning around and moving around in a room and making sure that they never collide, making sure that they just don't know that it feels like magic.
Congratulations, guys. I'll pass on to Miriam. So, Miriam, you're in charge of, let me get this right. So, first, you need to construct the theater, then you need to construct the play inside of this theater, and then this needs to tour, it needs to be presented, produced. You are needing to, working at Five for many years, you're needing to
20.
So you have seen generations and iterations of this kind of reformatting, this constant question of like, well, fine, we bring out the fourth wall. What does that look like, right? What are the spaces that are required, and how do we make sure that these artworks can exist in 10 years' time, for example, right? So tell us a little bit about, the complexities of your job making that happen.
It's true that it's complex, but it brings so much joy. Blur is a unique proposition, and I don't say that because we produced it. I truly believe that it's I travel the world, as you know, Raphael, to look for new works, new experiences, meet new artists, and I've never experienced something like Blur. So to try to find a home for Blur is really incredible. We had the chance, and I want to acknowledge our partners, co-producers. They were mentioned, but I think it's a co-production between Phi Studio, but also Riverbed Theater in Taiwan and Onassis Culture, Onassis Foundation in Athens. Yes, I'm doing the distribution, but I'm not alone, of course. They are also doing distribution for Asia, and it's a team effort. Finding home for Blur it's not that complicated, but sometimes it's challenging, because if we go to theaters and we tell them that we can only welcome 10 people every hour, they go like, okay, but where is the model? But then when you start to talk to theater people and tell them that they will bring new audience to their venue, that's where the discussion is really becoming very interesting. And when we started to work on the distribution, and I remember we had discussions with Phoebe, who will be interested to bring Blur, and we thought it would be probably more galleries, museums. It's not the case. It's theater. We presented it last year in Taipei at the National Theater, then in Taichung National Theater, Tainan in Taiwan. It was in Venice during the film festival. We are between us, but the next step after Phi is actually Germany. It's going to be announced on Thursday, so that's why I think I can say. We're going to a festival called Theater der Welt in Chemnitz, which is a massive theater festival, and they will present Blur for only 4 days, which is really it takes 3 days to install, 4 days, and then 1 day to dismantle. And the other venues, I'm not allowed to say right now, but it's really going to be mainly going into theaters, hopefully for the next at least 2 years, maybe even more, depending on how technology evolves and visually, will it be still relevant in 2 years? We'll see. But yes, it's complex, but it's incredibly.
Is it possible to have, like I remember Robert Lepage used to have like 3 different productions going around the world. Could you
Yes.
replicate the model and tour it if need be?
That's what we do actually.
Okay.
There is currently a kit in Taiwan. There is the kit here. And potentially, if the demand is getting really like bigger and higher with the dates we're going to do in Europe, for instance, then potentially there will be a 3rd kit.
So do you think that that will allow us to bring the costs down? Because it's so, I mean, I don't know how much we can get into the economic model, and I'm sure it's not that interesting. But on the other hand, it is interesting to think the throughput is small, right? So you had the same with the production. Carne y Arena is an incredible experience, but not a lot of people can see it. And of course, prices then get high and so on. So I'm just curious whether, in fact, when Thomas was saying about this piece not actually occupying, or maybe you were saying not occupying that ambitious space, maybe there is the possibility to sort of replicate and help economically to bring it into a wider public, no?
I think, you know, this was really a learning curve. And we didn't know the destination. I had imagined a little bit more like a Kusama room, you know, in an installation or performance-oriented, more gallery contemporary art. And actually I was quite pleasantly surprised the response from showcasing it in Venice. It was a lot of the theater art directors that came to see us, which now gives us more intel for the next time. I mean, when we built the Infinite, for example, it was the first large-scale free roaming. And now, of course, we distribute Excurio, et cetera, and it's become more common, and venues are opening up for this opportunity. And I think we in-house really have the expertise to take care of the visitor and really run an operation that makes sense. And I think that now we have more experience with certainly the storytelling through this lens, but also the destination. So we are exploring. I really want to see us continue to push these boundaries. You know, now that we know if we're working in an actual theater as a destination, then we can design accordingly. You know, and I think when I think of the generations that are coming back to the theater, you know, they've grown up with you know, themselves and their virtual person, you know, more and more, and so this language is not uncomfortable. Right. But how do we integrate that into a more traditional program? And I think that those are the questions that will arise, because we constantly have to push the boundaries, because otherwise these stories get tired and people understand and move on, you know. But I think the opportunity here, especially being able to translate some of the more traditional practices and find room in this hybridity of storytelling, I think is, and now with a destination in mind, I think as we continue to push those boundaries, I'm excited.
Maybe I can contribute to the technical
Yeah.
side of the question as well, regarding this throughput question, you know, and the decision of how many spectators we can accommodate in a VR experience. With each of our projects, we've definitely grown our toolkit as well to better understand how can we accommodate as many spectators as possible, to of course have a disappointing our audiences, but also to make sure that we respect the artistic vision of the experience. You know, in the case of an experience like Blur, the intimacy of the piece is a key factor of how to really reach this level of intensity, emotional intensity of the experience. But on the technical side, we're always looking for ways that we can continue to reach new places or new audiences. And even though when we're trying to keep this intimacy, we are looking for ways that we could potentially improve our tools and business models so that potentially we can find some tricks that would allow us to maximize our throughput without affecting operation costs too much and making sure that the piece can be shown in as many places as possible. And one other key factor is how we design these virtual experiences so that they can adapt to many different physical spaces. As many theaters will not have the same dimensions, or some will have columns in the middle, or will have different requirements regarding emergency exits and such. And being able to adapt to these different physical spaces is a very powerful key aspect of Blur, I think, which has allowed it to tour in many different locations already, and guarantees that it also has a future in being distributed in.
How big is the touring crew?
The touring crew?
Yeah, like for example, if I guess it depends. If it was at the beginning, it was more of you, but eventually, like how big is the team that needs to travel to a location to set up?
So, to set up is a bigger question.
It's like to set up, you need 2 people. To operate, there's the ninja.
Tech master.
The operation team is about 4 people to really manage the core of running the experience, but setting up all the structure and everything might take,
So you need like 2 people for ideally 3 days to set up, and then 1 day to dismantle. And then, of course, you have the actresses. The co-director would love to have always, like at least the main actress coming from Taiwan, but it can also be casted locally, so that then it's less expensive because you don't have to fly them from Taiwan and accommodation. And so this, we can play a little bit, with some numbers here and there.
So if you have a different actress, do you need to update the avatar?
No, but it has to be Asian actress.
Okay, I see. Okay. So let's go back to your expertise, because you're saying you haven't seen anything like Blur. I hadn't either. I mean, I've seen a lot, but... and it's not really the technical innovation, though I completely respect what you guys have done. It's more just, again, going back to techno-optimism, right? The experiences that are taking place in so much of these helmets and immersive environments, it's all this, sinister refusal to address real issues, right? So I always complain about virtual butterflies while the real butterflies are being decimated. I think that the success of Blur, as the case with Carne y Arena, is you're dealing with the real world, and in that sense, I want to invite you to join me in hating the word immersion, and instead join me in calling it inversive experience, not immersive experience, but inversive. Why inversive? Because my feeling is that what you guys are doing is very Brechtian. You are specifically the moments where the characters look at you and establish eye contact, that's straight out, sort of this Brechtian removal. And it activates a sense of urgency, of intimacy that you mentioned, Thomas. But also the subjects are the subjects of life and death. Montaigne said that to philosophize is to learn how to die. Well, art needs to be about that too. So I want to ask you, I know you said there's nothing like it, but what other experiences have you seen that straddle complex issues of politics, of death, of revenge, of cloning, of techno-pessimism?
I mean, obviously the ultimate one is Carne y Arena. I don't know, Phoebe, if you remember, when I saw Carne y Arena for the first time in 2017 at the Cannes Film Festival, I became obsessed with that piece. Carne y Arena is a VR experience directed by Alejandro Inarritu that was world premiering in Cannes in 2017. We brought it to Montreal in 2021 at Arsenal. We showed it for 6 months. It was sold out, but it's a piece that can only welcome 4 people every hour, even less than Blur. Carne, to answer your question, is definitely the ultimate one. And it would be hard for me to find, right away, find another one, because it left such a powerful impression, and it's unfortunately so relevant, even more today with what's happening south of the border, that I would really have a hard time to find another piece that had, apart from Blur, but that had such a powerful impression, impression on me. So
Immersive experience, yeah. So walk me through. So you walk into a producer's office, and now you need to sell Blur to me, right? And when I think about immersive as like Van Gogh and charging people to see like what we've already seen, but your job is now to pitch something that is dystopian, that is dark, that is mournful, that it has confusing narratives and strange creatures with 3 heads. So can you do that for us? Just
or you just did it.
No, but they want comfort. People want, like, my problem with immersive experience is that people want a spa. They want to just be on the receiving end of this stuff that is not going to be challenging.
Then they're not the right people for Blur.
Right. But so do you find that there is enough, like finally, there's enough interest in the gravitas of the subjects that are being addressed?
100%.
Yeah, okay. Which is why you're getting the traditional theaters interested, right? Instead of...
when we presented in Venice last year, and I was there from day one till the last day, and from the first presentation till the last one, and I saw the reaction of the people, like from being moved in tears to when they removed the headset, like, give me a moment, I cannot talk to you right now. And as Phoebe said, we had a lot of theater people coming because they were curious to see and experience Blur. So for the ones that experienced it, I didn't, like, not I, but we don't need to convince them. They will take it. It's a hard thing, though, to explain Blur. And we also don't want to say too much because we want to keep a little bit of mystery about the piece. But yeah, the description you just made is probably what I would have done.
Excellent. So we, how are we doing with time? We actually have to start opening the floor to questions. I think we have like 5 more minutes. I would love it if you guys would share with the public some of your own questions for each other, if you have some. Is that something that we should do, or you're all figured out each other? Like, is there the possibility that Blur has an outcome that you did not expect? So let's talk a bit about what Miriam just said about people going in and having, being in tears. So, Karine from my studio went and she's like in tears. This is very moving. But have you also been surprised by people finding the dance scene funny? Like, it's actually kind of hilarious cabaret, and it's absurdist, and it's, are you surprised by some of the responses that people have had? Yeah.
Very. And actually pleasantly surprised. I think in the early days of VR, I remember seeing an early piece by Punch Drunk, the immersive theater company, but they did a VR piece called Believe Your Eyes. Mm-hmm. And I remember, they reenacted the same room that you were entered in physically. And it was the story of a shadow man and a dancer, and the dancer comes up to you in VR, but there's a live dancer, you don't know it, and she spins your chair. And it was the first time I'd felt a haptic moment in a VR headset. And I went, oh, for me it triggered something that I thought, oh, I'm beginning to see where this can go. I mean, I'm talking like a decade ago, well, maybe 8 years ago. And for me to have the opportunity to weave in a story with a narrative and an emotional journey in this format, and then migrate, seamlessly, hopefully, into a coherent story through multiple formats, I was surprised that we were able to sustain and to get people in the story and not worried about the technology. And that to me is a big shift, because I remember the early days. It was like, oh, this is cool, you know. And now I really see the theater coming back into my own personal life in a different way, because I think the opportunity and the sophistication of the audience is there.
Can you reveal some of the haptic things that you have? So haptic means touch or kinetic, that you just feel, sense of touch, right, in the piece, or is that something that's secret?
I don't think it's a secret. I
Okay.
mean,
I want to talk about especially the chemical reaction.
yeah.
That's incredible.
That was, I think, Thomas was alluding to it earlier, because you don't know if you're looking at 360 cinema or you're actually through a VR window.
Yeah, there's probably not many VR experiences that can claim to make you do a chemical reaction in the middle of it, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think for us it was really a way to kind of blur this line between virtual and real, and make people suddenly feel really like they're taking part in this experience, and their actions have a physical impact on it. And I think it's a very powerful moment of the experience, which really contributes to people really feeling impacted by the message of the experience. You know, you were asking about what we expect of...
Oh, look, the chemistry.
How we... Yeah, there it is. You were asking what we... about the reactions of the audience, and I think you were saying about how people want to feel like that at the spa in an immersive experience, and there's definitely an argument for this, and we can see in terms of popularity what the kind of VR experiences are popular right now. But I feel like there's also an opposing movement that's happening, where people want to feel touched. People want to feel that there's meaning to what they're doing, and I feel like, you know, the reception that Blur has been getting is kind of also speaking in that direction. And you know, you started this conversation saying that the small group size of Blur meant that we couldn't get 100 people applauding. I feel like if we did, we would have 100 people crying instead, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to be facing this. So maybe it's also good that we're keeping it intimate like this.
It's like a petri dish. I mean, in a way, it's experimental. Like what you're trying is an experiment, and we'll see over time how it's considered and so on. Thank you so much. Oh.
Yeah, just quick, because we have it there, and you just mentioned the petri dish, and like you asked, like some things we were not expecting. We were not expecting people to drink the petri dish.
I know. I saw the guy next to me, and it's like, dude, like, don't drink that. And the actor, thank God this.
It's not a shot.
but it looks like. I mean, I thought it was a
laughing,
tequila,
but that's true.
but here's the thing: it's like, thank God you have real actors who are like, no, stop it. You know, do not drink that. You know, it's just, it's very, very amazing. Okay, so maybe we have time to open up for questions. I think that there is a microphone, and there's already il y a une question là.
Congratulations on this piece and everything that you achieve in it. I think a lot of us were very impressed. A question for Phoebe, in the name of Craig also, but I'm curious to know if there was a dream that you had at the beginning that you could not achieve because of technology, perhaps, something that you had to let go, that you really wanted to do, perhaps, but there was just a limit to it, because sometimes that reveals a lot also about the work we try to do.
I mean, I think this was I see it as a research model, so I was really happy with the results. I'm probably something that I would like to work towards with the team is also the accessibility to it, you know, and think about how, you know, we can have more people be able to see the experience simultaneously. In terms of the creative process, you know, I was surprised happily that the things that I was most worried about was the coherency and the transition, because some of the things that I like in the absurd world and the surrealism and the references to world building is not everybody's cup of tea, and I was pleasantly surprised at the emotional impact of the narrative that, despite our poetry, it really, and I think with the help of the experience through this intimacy, really provided the safe space for the audience to feel that they can feel, and in this strange world. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm pleasantly surprised with the reaction, and really feel that this is an opportunity to move forward in this exploration.
Thank you so much.
Do we have other questions? Right in the center.
Bonsoir. Vous jouez à travers la pièce avec plusieurs réalités. Et lorsqu'on pense à la construction du récit tout le long de l'expérience, comment avez-vous fait vos choix de différentes réalités selon les besoins du récit? Est-ce que c'est des choix conscients ou c'est des choix qui sont venus par les workshops?
Je dirais qu'en... Should I answer in English or... Okay. Donc, je dirais que c'est vraiment cet aspect collaboratif et aussi itératif de la construction de l'expérience qui a permis d'explorer en fait ces différents sujets. Donc en fait, vraiment, les différents workshops qu'on a effectués nous ont permis de tester différentes technologies qu'on avait à notre disposition. Puis ensuite, on testait de les mettre en scène de différentes manières et comprendre en fait comment obtenir le meilleur impact, en fait. Comment est-ce que cet outil pouvait vraiment servir à la vision du projet. Donc c'est vraiment par ces itérations, en testant une technologie, puis ensuite en retournant écrire, puis en essayant de la mettre en scène différemment, puis en testant à nouveau, qu'on a réussi à mettre en place en fait ces processus. Mais en effet, ces technologies, elles ont vraiment beaucoup changé pendant ce projet. Par exemple, en fait, justement, la scène avec la réaction chimique, elle est passée vraiment par de nombreuses itérations qui, en fait, initialement ne ressemblaient pas du tout à ça, qui étaient en fait plutôt initialement même une espèce de scène en groupe où les spectateurs se trouvaient autour de l'actrice. Et il n'y avait pas vraiment de réaction initialement. On utilisait la même technologie qui permettait de voir l'actrice en réalité au travers des caméras du casque. Mais en fait, ça fait longtemps, là, j'ai un peu oublié comment se passait la scène, mais en effet, le principe était complètement différent, et c'est au travers de ces itérations qu'on est atterri au résultat final.
Merci. Is there another question I can? Okay.
Sorry. I've not experienced the piece, but I've tried my best to listen thoroughly to all of your comments and points, and some key takeaways I've heard through the conversation or the panel is research model, meta, techno-optimism somehow, but I think it was the contrary to techno-optimism, and dystopian. I feel like they often go together in new media. And I was wondering, actually my question is not to cue the title in Blur, but in every new iteration of media, whether it be digital art / painting, before we had physical canvases, then we get tablets, and at some point cinema and photography appear as opposed to paintings, and now we're at this point where virtual reality is blurred, sorry, is mixed in between. Do you think, and you have mentioned, the thing that was very important is you have mentioned some people want to feel at a spa, and you have mentioned some people might want to feel touch. But do you think at this point in time where we are, because like technology are just gonna grow further, you might have unwantingly or wantingly breach this line where people feel comfortable enough with where technology can lead them? Because before, I guess you implemented this sense of like actor being present as simultaneously as you're feeling the very much immersive / immersive experience. Do you think like you have reassured people of the dystopia? Like, I don't think it was necessarily your goal, but do you think you have opened a door? Because like I'm someone who cares about like safekeeping, archival, everything that's very like physical, old manual, old books, blah blah blah. Like I'll read a book physically instead of like on my tablet. But like in this world where people are very in one box or the other, like in a old school, let's go back, or like let's go forward, do you think you have opened this door where people finally feel safe thanks to Blur, despite the dystopia? I'm asking this question because I've not experienced Blur.
So who would you want to answer that question?
I guess Thomas, because he's the one who mentioned that perhaps people want to feel touched. And I feel like all the commentary like shows a very thorough reflection, and like it's not like whatever. Thomas,
So-
sorry.
I feel like the key word that I understood from your question is you're asking if people are comfortable with this, with experiencing something like this. And I think that really brings a good question. Is Blur a comfortable experience?
And it isn't, thank God.
I don't.
Because the problem is this comfort, right? So Matisse said that the art should be a comfortable chair. Well, not while there's planetary extinction. You know, like this is, I mean, of course there should be art that is beautiful and enjoyable. But if the artwork is not shaking you right now, it's not artwork of its time, right? Like to me, paradoxically, a dystopian take on reality is optimistic. Because what's really weird is to pretend that nothing's happening, you know, that we don't have fascism and oligarchs and all these things. Like, I mean, to me, the show is, it shakes you, it makes you think, it's problematic, you go over it and over it. Like, I had an opportunity to look at a lot of material preparing for this talk, and the piece is multidimensional, you know? It's like it needs a second reading. It's really a problem, by the way. Because, you know, it's not only, you want to see it a couple of times, but it's most art that is significant, that is durable, in my opinion, has to shake you.
I agree with this statement, and I really think that this is also a part of why I believe Blur has been receiving such good reception. You know, sometimes I blend in with the crowd coming out of the experience, and I listen to how people talk about it coming out, and there's a lot. Montreal is a really great place to experience VR. There's a lot of things to watch with this medium, but I feel like there's a tendency recently for this medium to be used to make you comfortable and tell stories that maybe have already been told before or will not reach you to an emotional level. And I think, well, it seems to be the case, and I also hope it is the case, but I feel like why people find Blur so refreshing is because it's not a comfortable experience. It's an experience that will say the things that it wants to say and will make sure that you feel them the way that it's intended. And I hope you will get the chance to experience Blur to also share in this feeling.
I also would like just to add, because the way I interpreted the question or some of the thinking is the tactile. And I think that, you know, the engagement, you know, I was really fascinated to engage the body. And, you know, in many situations with VR, headsets, et cetera, we're often passive. We're sitting, we might be in a spinning chair, but we're not necessarily free roaming. And this Blur, we tried to push that further with some of the you asked earlier, the haptics, you know, the wind is actually somebody's holding a fan. You know, I mean, it's really theatrical stuff, you know, but it's very human, and yet your perception and your suspension of belief, I guess, is, you know, through the headset and the immersion, but I think that there's a ritual to come in, and you're engaging with a live person, and far more intimately than in the theater, you know, because there's touch and there's, you know, but there's a certain setting the stage. And I think some of these sort of human engagement with another and your own body, I think is you know, in reference to the tactile book versus the screen, but we are in between now, and I think that this is a progression towards storytelling that I think will invite a different literary interpretation than maybe the reinterpretation of some of the experiences we've
And
seen,
actually,
you know.
and actually, now that you say it, as an alternative to immersive, embodied. That's a much better word because you're citing it in your. So that
You
might.
just don't like the word immersive, do you?
I really don't like it. Yeah, I'm sorry. So one last question, folks. So I mean, how many hands are there? Okay, 2 questions.
Hi, thanks. I came from cinema. Just how much time since you start the project to 2-3 years? How much time from the beginning to the first show? And just another question. I don't know. In documentary, we do it with 300,000 and maybe 1 million. How much is the budget for something like this? More than millions, 100,000s? Spread in 4 years, 5 years?
So the project was developed over the course of about 2.5 years, really, from the first, you know, kind of creative workshop where we started this, like, imagining, you know, what it would be like, to the opening, which was in Taiwan. There was about, so the first workshop was in, that's it. Yeah, that's it. 2023, and then open in 2025. Yeah. So it was about 1.5 years, I think, more than 2 years. 1.5. Yeah.
But we also didn't, you know, we had task teams, and it was done over time, but we weren't working as a team full time on this.
That's it.
You know, so it was we had sectioned out time to do a workshop situation, to assemble the team from Taipei, you know, with the team from Montreal. And then we actually worked, which was kind of interesting, is we were able to work globally through virtual conversations. Our biggest challenge was the time change, obviously. That's why it was so great to meet in Athens, because we were on the same time zone.
Everybody jet lagged.
Yeah, but it was quite an astonishing creative process, you know, working globally this way, and to answer your question about time, you know, there was a lot of thought and experimentation. So I would say, what did we define? 1.5 years?
Yeah, about 1.5 years.
Maybe I'll about the budget. Let's speak about art. I don't think that right now we don't really want to talk about the budget, but we were like really fortunate enough to get some funding from like public funding here in Quebec and Canada, in Taiwan through TAICA, and also through the Onassis Foundation. And the fact that we were 3 partners, of course, around the table, well, that helps also. But let's talk about art and not numbers necessarily.
Okay, so I think there was one more question over here.
Hi, and thank you, everyone. And I wanted to ask towards the experience itself and how, when you're thinking about the direction of it, because the physical experience that happened that combined also with the technology are so specific and so key. And it really helps to have this kind of like disrupting of the experience that you're like, okay, I'm in a virtual world, and then you see these physical parts that are so important. How did you choose and balance those moments where you're interactive in the real world versus the technology? Because I feel they're so key, and that's why they work so well, because if they were more, perhaps we will get used to it and you're like, oh, okay, it's just a dynamic. But since the beginning, and of course it's like, I could also feel when I was experiencing the theater behind, because since the moment you start, you know, okay, there's something off, and then you start discovering more. But how does the direction and the combination with technology and reality, those moments of interaction happen? And how do you decide to be like, okay, it's just gonna be this, but it's gonna be really impactful? And how do you like manage to create these final moments? And you're like, okay, this is gonna be what it is.
I think, you know, the interesting thing about Riverbed is they developed a theater for one. So they really built up, you know, the storytelling and the scenographic language to address one audience member. I think that translated beautifully to virtual reality, and for obvious reasons. And I think that talking to Craig and also wanting to integrate the technology, you know, putting on the headset, you know, that it had a bit of a ritualistic sense and that it was part of the story. So I think through our discussion and through our common ground, we wanted to create, especially coming out of the gate, sort of with this experiment, was something that would put the audience at ease, that they would get engaged in a very sensitive way. And I think that really informed the discretion of the live acting, and to look at this, you know, as not just an acting exercise, but we really feel that this is a team to execute the program and the operations. You know, I salute the actresses and the people behind the scenes, because they're really working for the sake of the work. You know, so I think as we think further and how we can integrate the live component, you know, those are questions that are exciting to ask now that we've come out with Blur, you know. But I think the initial idea was to integrate as much of the experience into the story.
Okay, so folks, before we thank them, I want to do a special thing. Eddie, can you cue the trailer? Don't play it yet. So what I want to do is, if you forgive me, you guys are gonna stand right here, and then we're gonna play. Please stand up. Thank you. You're gonna stand right here, right there on the stairs. Okay, and then Eddie, when I tell you, you're gonna play the trailer. Oh no, you're gonna make. Oh yes, and now we're gonna make you come out and get an applause, because you don't have that in your small little 10-person experience. All right, Eddie, can you play the trailer, please?
Not yet. We will tell you when we're ready to play the trailer.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, we also don't need the trailer. It's okay. Okay. So, and with you, everybody. Oh, okay. Let's hear it. Play it, please.
It's easy to get lost sometimes. To lose yourself. The movement from here to there. And now. And then stillness.
So everybody give it up for Phoebe, Thomas, Edouard, and Miriam. That's right. Woo! Yeah. And now you have to bow. Bow, hold hands. That's right. Very good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming.